whatever you do actually leaves a mark on the world history. But with that said, we can't control what's happening to us. We control nothing, but we influence everything. And before I go into this book, I want to explain to you why the first slide after the lesson is going to be about the author. You know, I'm one of those people who reads an interesting book and then never remembers what was the name of the author who wrote this book and who was that author. Now, when I have interviewed the authors, I suddenly realized that understanding the person on a deeper level, seeing them as a human being, actually adds so much to the books, because some of the books in my list have been surprising to me. The author added so much value to what they have written. So I think it's really important that we remember people behind the books. We actually notice, and the benefit of my work is that I get to interview those authors because they're contemporaries, they're the freshly released authors. This idea comes from Brian Klaas. He also, incidentally, was my first interview. An amazing person, a professor of international politics or global politics in a London university. In his book, he goes very deeply explaining this idea. Whatever you do actually leaves a mark on the world history. But with that said, we can't control what's happening to us. And it's a very interesting concept, because what he talks about, even the fact that you are right now sitting in this chair, has been a miraculous row of events, sometimes random events, that had led you to even exist, led us, humanity, to even exist. Now, his whole book is, of course, dedicated to that, but the main idea is that, but for small changes, the world that we know it, the way we know it right now, would have been very, very different. Now, Brian Klaas actually talks about historical events, significant historical events. He starts his book with the bombing of Hiroshima, and how this city got bombed rather than Kyoto, which was initially planned to be bombed. And he goes deeper into that, which is a very, very, very interesting philosophical concept. Now, I have to say that this book is much more philosophical than it is didactical, but I love philosophical books because you think along with them. And another thing that I had to mention to you, that these quotes are not strictly speaking quotes, because I slightly simplify them for you. Otherwise, it would be a little bit too overwhelming. Also, try not to read them, because I use them just to keep track of the thankless task of regurgitating other people's ideas. Now, with that said, what Brian Klaas also says, that because we can't control what's happening to us, a lot of the times this need and the desire to simplify the world, to find a certain very simple ways to explain the world, it actually backfires at us. Because very often when a complex system is being pushed to simplification and you're trying to see the cause and effect very clearly where it doesn't exist, you actually push that system to a breaking point. So the point of this whole thing is that, yes, we can't control what's happening to the world, and the worst thing is that by trying to control it, we make it worse. And it may seem like a downer, but the surprising thing, when I was interviewing Brian, he's a very, very positive person. The idea he wants to convey is that despite the fact that we don't have control over the world, everything that we do still matters, because every step that you do in your life actually can have repercussions so much later, and you don't even know who is going to be affected by what you're doing. And now, this is the quote which is not Brian's per se, but I love this quote, because he says, in the end, he says that no matter why the world is the way it is, even if you can't explain it, the best thing you can do is to love the people around you who are there to be loved. And Brian really conveys this message that this whole uncontrollability, uncertainty, it's a call to enjoy what you have right now in this present moment, because that's the only thing that we have. Now, it is, as I said, it's a philosophical book, and that leads me to the next wonderful idea, which maybe isn't new, but the idea about that you can't really be too focused on your one purpose. And this is something that we do a lot. We try to find the passion. You know, you go out for a party and they ask, so what's your passion? And I always get so lost. Like, I have so many passions. You know, I'm also a farmer, actually. I have sheep and Highland cows, and I can very passionately talk about that, but today I'll talk about books. This idea comes from Guy Kawasaki, who probably doesn't need a lot of introduction. If I were to replace his bio, yes, he is the chief evangelist of Canva. He was the first chief evangelist of Apple. In fact, he came up with this term, evangelist. But if I were to replace his long bio, I would say a legend, because he's truly a legend. Now, I have to say a little explanation. In his latest book, which was just launched, Guy Kawasaki talks to Gen Z, which is exciting for me. I think it's really cool. So he talks to Gen Z. So his book is written in that way, and when you read it, you might think it's very... it starts with very basic truths, but it's very fast-paced, very straightforward. And what's characteristic to Guy, he's very straightforward in your face. So he has opinions, and he's not afraid to share them. And I asked him, he said, you know, Kristina, I'm 70 years old, not yet, but 70. I just can't be bothered. If somebody doesn't like me, I don't care. In fact, I know the responsibility. I have the responsibility to express my opinions the way they are. So please don't be shocked by his quote, because he says that when he hears people talk about you have to find your passion, he throws up a little bit. But the point is that passion is not something that you just find. This is something that you develop. You develop and you work on that. Now, this idea is just one of the ideas that he shares in his book. This idea doesn't reflect the whole book, just one idea I wanted to bring out. What Guy Kawasaki suggests instead is that you do things that you're interested about. And you just do a lot of things which you're interested about, and then from those interests, you develop passions. In fact, in our conversation, he talks about the younger people that we force them to look for their passions, but their job is to scratch their itches. But I would say it's true for us as well. Guy, for example, picked up surfing at the age of 43 because his children do that. Now, that leads me to the next idea, which I want to share with you, because that next idea actually supports Guy Kawasaki's idea. In fact, it was so funny because I had these interviews back to back, and both of them were saying exactly the same thing. Stop forcing your children to know their passion before they even have finished their school. And this idea comes, so the idea is that we infect everyone with anxiety, but that supportive thought comes from this wonderful author, Alison Escalante. She's a pediatrician, also a professor of pediatrics. C Start, which is on parenting. She talks about how this high anxiety parenting, which is very common nowadays, actually is not because of the parents being silly, but because the whole society is very high anxiety. So because we live in the society of high anxiety, we actually translate it in ourselves. And then she goes further, and she, actually, this is a little sidestep. I found it just super interesting. So there's research that says that high-pressure environment for your children, for example, if you push your children for achievement, is equal to trauma from, let's say, from such things as discrimination or violence and stuff like that. So when you pressure your children for achievement, in essence, it's as bad for their mental health, for adolescent mental health, as if you had a very bad family situation. Like, for example, you were violent or you had alcoholism in your family. It's just as traumatic for children. And I found it really, really striking, because when I lived in Asia, I know that the pressure for good results in Asia is so high that the suicide rate among teenagers, especially those who are finishing school, are like way higher than they should be. The quote that I like the most from this author is this. It reminds me a little bit of Mark Twain, but basically she says that too much time spent achieving gets in the way of other important developmental milestones. The point, and actually there are a lot of cross ideas between the different books, you will notice, from different authors who actually don't know each other. But the idea is that we're sometimes trying too hard to control the situation, trying too hard to create something for us which we think something that we want, and we create more problems by doing that. Now, what Alison Escalante in the end is trying to convey is that if our children are anxious, it's because these are the behaviors that they see from us, they learn from us, and very often they mirror our own anxiety. So she brings it all back to the parents, saying that, first of all, you have to see what your children need, but more than that, you have to be comfortable with what you see, and what you see might not be what you like. So do you, as a parent, have the capabilities to deal with what you see and you don't like?